Hakobo's mistress wore my wedding dress. In the heat of an argument, she pregnant at the time fell and lost her child. The doctors told her she'd never be able to conceive again. Furious, Hakobo blamed me for everything and sent me away to a convent overseas, forcing me into silence under the pretense of repentance. A year passed. When Hakobo finally showed up to retrieve me, thinking he could sweep me back into his world, I was gone vanished with a child in my arms. He found me by accident, and when he saw the baby, his eyes turned bloodshot. "What is this?" he demanded, voice trembling with rage. "Are you using this child to blackmail me? Or worse, trying to humiliate Rowena, since she can't have children?" Of course, Hakobo had no idea that the baby wasn't his, nor that I was about to marry someone else. After more than a year apart, Hakobo was still the same arrogant man. But I had changed. I lowered my voice, looked at him calmly, and said, "You're wrong about everything." He scoffed, his eyes full of mockery. "Looks like you haven't changed at all either. With a temper like yours, how could you ever be part of the Han family?" Just then, Mason, my 1-month-old son, began to cry uncontrollably, cutting off his verbal assault. Hakobo frowned, an unfamiliar softness flickering in his eyes. For a second, he reached out, as if to hold Mason, but a sweet voice called from behind and stopped him mid-motion. "Hakobo." It was Rowena. She walked toward us, and when she saw Mason, her expression shifted.
Darkened.
But then she quickly masked it, linking her arm through Hakobo's with practiced affection. "I didn't know you came to see Jessica," she purred. "Am I interrupting?" Hakobo quickly shook his head. "Of course not. She's had a year to reflect. I'm sure she's not as bitter as before." He turned to gauge my reaction. I smiled faintly. "You're not interrupting anything," I said. "The one who doesn't belong here is me. So I'll go." I turned to leave, but Hakobo grabbed my wrist tightly. "I thought you'd changed, Jessica. But clearly I was wrong." A year ago, his words might have broken me. But now I didn't flinch. I pulled my hand free and said firmly, "I have a flight to catch. You two can play whatever drama you want without me." My return to this country had a purpose. But as fate would have it, we ended up on the same flight. I boarded with Mason in my arms, and moments after takeoff, he started crying from hunger. I hurried to the nursing room, but Rowena stood in my way, eyes flashing. "Can't you calm your baby down?" she snapped. "Let me try. You clearly don't know what you're doing." I held Mason close, backing away. "He has asthma," I said calmly. "I'll handle him." But to my shock, Rowena began crying. "I know I can't have children anymore," she sobbed. "And I don't blame you for my miscarriage. But can I even hold him?" Her tears drew attention. Other passengers looked over, their eyes filled with judgment toward me, as if I had done something unspeakable. Hakobo rushed over. "Jessica, it's just a hug. What's wrong with you? She's not a monster." I snapped. "Mason is my son. Why do I have to make amends for something I didn't cause?" But before Hakobo could shout again, other women on the plane began to speak up. "Oh, look, another homewrecker pretending to be the victim. Trying to steal someone else's child? That's low. She has the nerve to cry in public after everything." Rowena blushed in embarrassment while Hakobo tried to save face. "This is a family matter," he said stiffly. "I'm the child's father." One woman burst out laughing. "You? The father? Helping another woman steal someone else's baby? Pathetic." The entire cabin buzzed with disapproval. Hakobo looked as if he'd been publicly slapped. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. He was humiliated, completely stripped of control. Rowena ran to the bathroom, crying. But as she tried to enter the nursing room, Hakobo slammed his hand against the door and ordered a nearby flight attendant coldly. "Plenty of passengers need this room. But Jessica doesn't. She can leave." The flight attendant, clearly unsure of how to respond, hesitated. Hakobo was a platinum member after all. But the other passengers weren't so intimidated. One of them hurled a water bottle at him. "Who the hell do you think you are?" someone yelled. You think you own this plane? Hakobo stood stiff, ignoring the backlash. I stepped back calmly.
Fine.
I won't use the nursing room. Just then, the elderly woman beside me touched my arm gently. Sweetheart, I'll cover you up. Just feed your baby, and I'll go file a complaint against that man. I smiled with gratitude. She draped my coat over me, and finally, Mason fed and fell asleep peacefully. He slept until we landed. When we got off the plane, Hakobo tried again. Jessica, take a taxi if you want. But my son isn't going with you. I stared at him, stunned by his delusion. Mason isn't your son. He laughed loudly, bitterly. You've really lost your mind, haven't you? You just say whatever you want now. Before he could spit out another insult, Rowena dramatically sniffled behind him, clutching a tissue like the world had wronged her. Hakobo's mistress had worn my wedding dress. She had been pregnant. In the middle of our confrontation, she slipped, fell, and lost the baby. The doctors said she'd never have children again. And Hakobo, without hesitation, sent me away to a convent overseas if I were the one who destroyed her future. A year passed before he showed up, expecting to retrieve me like a forgotten belonging. But I had already escaped, holding a baby in my arms. He tracked me down, eyes bloodshot with anger. What is this? He demanded. Are you trying to force me to marry you through this child? Or is this some twisted attempt to humiliate Rowena for not being able to conceive? He had no idea the baby wasn't his. Nor did he know I was preparing to marry someone else. After over a year, Hakobo was exactly the same, arrogant, full of pride. But I had changed. I lowered my voice and met his gaze steadily. You're wrong about everything, I said. He didn't flinch. He sneered. Still that same nasty attitude. And you think someone like you could ever be part of the Han family? Before I could respond, Mason, my 1-month-old son, began to wail uncontrollably. Hakobo's eyes flicked to the baby. For a moment, something soft, almost human, flickered in his gaze. He moved as if to pick Mason up but stopped when he heard a familiar voice. Hakobo. Rowena's voice floated across the space. She sauntered toward us and, when her eyes landed on the baby, her face clouded. But quickly, she smiled and wrapped her arm possessively around Hakobo's. I didn't know you came to see Jessica. Am I intruding? She cooed. Hakobo shook his head. Of course not. She's had plenty of time to reflect. I'm sure she's no longer so bitter. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave him a flat smile. You're not the one intruding, I said calmly. I am. So I'll be leaving. I turned, but Hakobo grabbed my wrist tightly. I told myself you wouldn't be so stubborn anymore, he snapped. But clearly I overestimated you. A year ago, those words might have crushed me. Now, I had no desire to argue. I yanked my wrist away. I have a flight to catch. You two enjoy yourselves. I had important things to take care of. But as fate would have it, Hakobo, Rowena, and I ended up on the same flight. The moment I boarded, Mason began to cry from hunger. I rushed toward the nursing room, but Rowena stepped in front of me like a wall. Don't you know how to soothe a baby? She hissed. He won't stop crying. Let me try. I clutched Mason protectively. He has asthma, I replied evenly. I'll handle it. To my surprise, Rowena began to sob, wiping at imaginary tears. I can't have children anymore, she whimpered. I'm not blaming you, but can I at least hold him? Her crying attracted stares. People turned, whispering, judging. Hakobo appeared, frowning. Jessica, he snapped. It's just a hug. Why can't you let her hold the baby? What has she ever done that you can't forgive? You're so rude. I had had enough. I glared at him. Mason is mine. Rowena lost her baby. That was a tragic accident. But why am I the one paying for it? Hakobo opened his mouth to scold me, but several women on the flight spoke up. She's pretending to be innocent while trying to steal someone's child, one said.
Disgusting.
Snatching a baby in public? And then crying about it, another added. Rowena blushed, and Hakobo rushed to defend her. "This is a family matter. I'm the child's father," he growled. A passenger scoffed loudly. "You? The father? Helping another woman steal a baby? What a disgrace." "I hope I never have to fly with either of you again," another chimed in. The humiliation on Hakobo's face was visible. His chest rose and fell violently. He looked like he was about to explode. Rowena, furious and tearful, bolted toward the bathroom, but when she tried to enter the nursing room, Hakobo blocked the door with his hand and barked at the flight attendant. "There are plenty of people on this plane who actually need the nursing room. Jessica doesn't." The attendant, caught off guard, stood frozen. Hakobo was a platinum member. She didn't dare argue. But the other passengers didn't hold back. Someone threw a bottle at him. "Is this your plane?" someone shouted. "What kind of man are you?" Hakobo didn't flinch, just gestured to the attendant, still blocking the door. I remained calm.
Fine.
"I won't use the room," I said. At that moment, the kind woman beside me leaned over. "Let me help you cover up," she whispered. "You nurse your baby. I'll go file a complaint about this abusive behavior." I smiled gratefully. She wrapped my coat around me, and I fed Mason right there in the seat. He finally calmed down and fell asleep in my arms, sleeping peacefully until we landed. At the airport, I walked out with Mason in my arms, not heading toward Hakobo's car. He looked irritated, clearly believing I was still angry with him. "Jessica, you can take a taxi." "But my son stays with me." I turned to him, baffled. "Mason isn't your son." Hakobo burst out laughing loud, bitter and mocking. "You've really lost it," he spat. "You're saying anything now." He looked ready to unleash more cruelty, but then Rowena sniffled dramatically behind him, dabbing at her nose with a tissue. Hakobo's attention snapped to her. "Are you cold?" he asked, concern flooding his face. Without waiting for a reply, he wrapped his coat around her shoulders and helped her into the front seat of the car like she was made of glass. When he turned back to me, there wasn't a trace of patience left. "If you want to stand in the cold, Jessica, then be my guest. Stay out here for as long as you want." After those cold final words, Hakobo didn't even glance back. He got in the car and drove away without hesitation, leaving me standing on the curb with my child in my arms. Moments later, Mr. Hans Butler pulled up in a sleek black car and stepped out with respectful calm. "Mrs. Han," he said formally, "the master would like to see his eldest grandson. Please come with me." I thought back to the day a year ago when Alejandro had helped me escape the convent. We had kept our engagement a secret at first. Mr. Han hadn't approved. Of course his family name came with expectations. But Alejandro, being the eldest son and never one to bend easily, told his father he'd marry me with or without his blessing. Faced with his son's unwavering resolve and now the existence of Mason, Mr. Han had no choice but to accept. As we pulled up to the Han estate, the long driveway shimmered with soft golden lights. Inside, Mr. Han's expression melted with affection as he took Mason into his arms. Then he glanced behind me, puzzled. "Where's Alejandro?" I explained that he was handling matters at the international headquarters and had asked me to visit in his place to help coordinate the local arrangements. Mr. Han nodded thoughtfully. Inside, the entire Han family was gathered, busy planning an extravagant wedding. Though Hakobo was also Mr. Han's son, his illegitimate status meant he'd never truly belong. He could have wealth, sure, but never the Han name, never the legacy. That night, after everything was confirmed, my aunt head of a prominent radio station announced our engagement publicly. Not long after, my phone buzzed. It was Hakobo. His voice was sharp, edged with disbelief and ridicule. "Jessica, how dare you plan a wedding with my father? Without even consulting me?" I let my voice go cold. "Do you really think your opinion matters that much?" I hung up without waiting for a reply and carried Mason upstairs to Alejandro's room. The next morning, I stepped out into the hallway and found Hakobo waiting. His face turned pale the moment he saw me emerge from his brother's room. "Why are you coming out of Alejandro's room?" he asked, his tone already loaded with suspicion. I didn't respond. There was no point. After a brief silence, Hakobo sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly. Fine, he muttered. If the wedding's happening, I won't fight it. Let's go. You need to try on your dress. I looked at him, baffled, and when I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm again, tighter this time. You're the one getting married, he said bitterly. And now you're the one who's cold. Is this your way of punishing me? Still mad about Rowena? His voice grew tight, his defenses rising. We grew up together. Her boyfriend dumped her. What's wrong with me caring about her? I had no desire to argue. I met his eyes and spoke slowly, clearly. You're mistaken. I'm not mad at all. I mean it. My words seemed to strike him harder than any accusation. His eyes darkened, and he stood still for a long moment before masking whatever turmoil was there. He waved to someone and said, I had the original dress restored. Whether you wear it or not, that's up to you. My heart fluttered briefly. The dress originally meant to be my wedding gown had been altered without my consent by Rowena. Alejandro had sent it back to China for restoration, knowing what it meant to me. Now it felt like more than just a gown. It was closure. As we stepped outside, Rowena bounced up to Hakobo like a giddy schoolgirl and clung to his arm. The moment she saw me, she tilted her head and spoke in that sugary tone of hers. Last time I altered Jessica's dress and got scolded so badly. My butt still hurts, she giggled, but I fixed it. The size is back to normal. You should be happy. She beamed. Hakobo, of course, tapped her nose playfully and replied, Only Rowena is this obedient. I knew she would come with us. So, without a word, I slipped into the back seat of the car. Hakobo paused for a moment, surprised, but said nothing. I fell asleep on the way, only waking once we reached the bridal boutique. Inside, the staff presented the fully restored gown. It was perfect, every stitch and fold as I remembered. I checked every detail, then asked them to store it safely. Hakobo had been waiting, watching my every move, and when I didn't try it on, he finally broke his silence. Jessica, he said with narrowed eyes, I went through so much to have it fixed. Aren't you going to try it? The staff hesitated, glancing at me. I remained expressionless and simply raised my hand. Please pack the dress, I said. I have other matters to attend to. Hakobo frowned, his eyes dimming as he watched me walk away. He moved as if to follow me, but Rowena quickly latched onto his arm again, pouting. Hakobo, she whined, I want to try on a wedding dress too. Why don't you stay with me? I got into a taxi, and through the glass window of the boutique, I saw Hakobo's expression frozen like a statue, pale and stunned. When the car pulled away, I finally allowed myself to exhale and relax. Take me to the biggest jewelry store in the city, I told the driver. Alejandro had been handling most of the wedding details, so I wanted to help in some way. Looking at rings felt like a small contribution, but one that mattered. Inside the shop, my eyes immediately landed on a stunning blue diamond from South Africa, radiant and rare. Excellent choice, miss, the saleswoman said. That would suit you perfectly. I smiled and asked her to wrap too. As I was about to pick a charm for Mason, I heard a familiar voice sneering. How does Jessica always know where to find us? Rowena said loudly. Is she following us? I didn't look up. I continued selecting Mason's charm. Just as the saleswoman handed me the boxes, Hakobo slapped them out of her hands. They crashed to the floor. So desperate now, he scoffed. You pretended not to care about the dress, but you run to pick diamonds? How pathetic. I ignored him. Rowena bent down and picked up one of the boxes. She opened it with exaggerated awe. Hakobo, this is beautiful. It would look amazing on you and Jessica. But I don't deserve to wear something this perfect. Hakobo, without hesitation, wrapped his arm around her, lifted the ring, and slipped it onto her finger. It's not just a ring, he said softly. It suits you perfectly, Rowena. She clenched her fists as if trying to hold herself back, but her voice rang out. This is my ring. Who gave you permission to put it on? Hakobo's expression instantly shifted. Without hesitation, He slapped her hand away with visible impatience. You went ahead and bought a wedding ring without even telling me, and I didn't complain. But me slipping it on Rowena for a second, that's where you draw the line? You're so petty. Rowena, pretending to be considerate, removed the ring a moment later. But secretly, she bent the band slightly before tossing it to the floor with a pout. I don't want this one anyway. The one I want is the one Hakobo's going to buy me. She then turned to him, her tone sugary sweet. Will you get me a new one, please? Jessica didn't say a word. She picked up the necklace she came for, paid, and left. The next day, she was already dressed and ready in her wedding gown when Hakobo barged into the dressing room, his fury impossible to hide. Jessica, he shouted. Is this about the ring? Is that why you're forcing this wedding now? Let me tell you, I am not going through with this. If you keep pushing like this, I'll make you regret it. But before he could storm out, the officiant, who had been reviewing his script nearby, cleared his throat with an awkward smile. Mr. Han, just a reminder, the groom isn't you. It's Mr. Alejandro. Hakobo froze. He lifted his head sharply, his eyes wide as they locked onto Jessica. What did he just say? Jessica, what is going on? What does he mean I'm not the groom? That it's my brother? Jessica calmly adjusted her makeup in the mirror and replied coolly. Since I returned to this country, I never once said I wanted to marry you. Everything you assumed was entirely in your head. She stood up, smoothed the skirt of her gown, and turned to him with a distant smile. You said you wouldn't participate? That's perfect because neither Alejandro nor I invited you. She paused and added, if you're not here to offer your blessings, then you're free to leave. As she lifted her dress to walk out, Hakobo grabbed her arm tightly, hard enough to leave a red mark. His voice trembled, and his face twisted in disbelief. Jessica, stop this. I tolerated your games before, but this is a wedding. You're really doing all this to hurt me? Refusing to marry me and dragging my brother into it. Jessica winced from the pain and, without thinking, slapped him across the face. A red mark bloomed across his cheek instantly, and the veins on his forehead bulged in rage. But she couldn't help laughing. It was all so absurd. Did he really think she still had feelings for him? That ship had sailed long ago, the day he locked her in a convent and walked away without a trace of guilt. She rubbed her sore arm and forced herself to stay composed. Just then, one of the staff called out to her it was time. She took a breath, gave Hakobo one last look, and leaned on her bridesmaid as she stepped onto the stage. Hakobo tried to follow, pleading for another conversation, another explanation. But Alejandro had already noticed and sent security to block the backstage area. The ceremony was kept simple. Jessica took Mason from the nanny and walked out with Alejandro. The crowd watched in silence. She felt nervous, exposed. Alejandro noticed and leaned toward her, whispering, Don't be nervous. I'm already your husband, remember? His voice steadied her. But whispers started spreading through the audience, those not from the Han family, unfamiliar with what had really happened. She already has a child? That was fast. Looks like she's just jumping from one Han to another. Probably just a status thing. Rich families marry like that all the time. There's no real love. The cold judgment stung. Jessica lowered her gaze, unsure what to do. Alejandro, without missing a beat, took the microphone from the officiant. Let me clarify something, he said, his voice firm. It was my brother Hakobo who hurt Jessica.
She's
been through more than most of you know. I've done everything I can to help her heal. As for Mason, Yesha's our child. It was our mutual decision, one made to appease our father. If anyone here pressured her to marry, it was me. The room fell silent. The judgment evaporated. The ceremony resumed. But just as the officiant began the next part of the vows, Hakobo charged onto the stage and yanked the microphone from his hands. Gasps filled the air. The calm atmosphere shattered. Alejandro immediately stepped in front of Jessica, shielding her. You need to leave, he warned, voice cold. Don't make me escalate this. But Hakobo wasn't listening. He looked past Alejandro, eyes locked on Jessica. "This is your last chance," he hissed. "Come with me."
Now.
Jessica's patience broke. She stared him down and replied with icy finality, "If you're having delusions, go see a doctor. Alejandro and I are getting married. You are not part of this." Hakobo laughed a sharp, hollow sound that filled the hall. Then, in one reckless motion, he raised the microphone as if to announce something. That was the final straw. Mr. Han, who had been seated quietly, rose to his feet, shaking with fury. "Hakobo," he bellowed, "do you even realize what you're doing? Do you still consider yourself part of this family?" Hakobo's lips trembled, his voice laced with resentment. "You never considered me part of this family, father." With those words, Mr. Han's face turned red. He gasped for air, voice unraveling. "Get him out now. This disgrace ends here." Jessica's aunt rushed to his side, patting his back, trying to calm him. Guards swarmed the stage. They grabbed Hakobo, wrestled the mic away, and dragged him off while the cameras clicked relentlessly. Alejandro turned to Jessica and squeezed her hand gently. "Don't worry," he said, smiling. "No one's going to stop us." With Hakobo finally gone, the ceremony could continue, but the media frenzy had already begun. Second Han's son crashes brother's wedding, tries to steal the bride. The headlines would write themselves. The chaos Hakobo had caused didn't just disrupt the wedding, it also led to his immediate removal as president of the company's local branch. As the ceremony concluded, Alejandro and Jessica left for the Han estate, where the family had prepared a lavish banquet. Mason, as always, stole the spotlight, drawing a flood of red envelopes from relatives eager to spoil him. Alejandro chuckled, visibly amused and slightly envious. "I've been abroad all these years and never got a single envelope. But now that I'm married, everyone's obsessed with my son." The table burst into laughter. Jessica's aunt smirked. "Looks like Alejandro's become quite the talker since he left." Jessica handed him one of Mason's envelopes to quiet him, but instead of backing down, Alejandro grabbed her hand, leaned in, and whispered teasingly, "I don't know how long this dinner will last, but we're not skipping our wedding night just because we already have a kid, are we?" Jessica blushed, her heart racing, and to hide her smile, she playfully squeezed his thigh under the table. He yelped softly. The joy around the table continued late into the evening. Alejandro eventually rested his head on Jessica's shoulder like a child, but as the night dragged on, he grew restless and stood to suggest ending the party. Just as he opened his mouth, a loud voice echoed from outside the hall. "Jessica, how long are you going to keep hiding from me?" It was Hakobo. He had forced his way into the estate, ignoring every barrier set to stop him. The room fell silent. Eyes darted nervously. But it was Mr. Han who slammed the table, his tone stern and void of any warmth. "Hakobo, if you still consider me your father, leave right now. Do not ruin your brother's marriage." Hakobo, face twisted in rage, shot back, "Jessica isn't my sister-in-law. She's my fiancée. Why should I pretend otherwise? This is all a joke." Alejandro, who had been calm until now, tensed immediately. His eyes darkened like an approaching storm. "Hakobo, Jessica, and I are already married. Everyone here knows it. Whether you accept it or not, you will address her as your sister-in-law." Hakobo's expression was unreadable. Tears or laughter, it was impossible to tell. But the coldness radiating from him was unmistakable. Sensing danger, Alejandro stepped in front of Jessica protectively. But she gently touched his shoulder and stepped forward. "Hakobo, or should I say brother-in-law, whatever you're trying to do, this isn't the place. At least act like a decent human being in front of everyone." His eyes reddened and his voice cracked. "Jessica, do we really have to end like this? Don't you remember how happy we were? The moment my brother returned, you threw it all away. How could you marry him so suddenly?" Jessica looked at him with a calm that was almost cruel. "What's done is done. This isn't the time or place for that conversation." Her quiet dismissal only enraged him more. He clenched his fists and took a step toward her, ready to grab her arm. but Mr. Han roared. How dare you? Alejandro pushed Hakobo back, shoving him nearly a meter away. I've given you more respect than you deserve, he warned. But this is your final warning. Hakobo barely had time to respond before Alejandro punched him straight in the face. Hakobo crashed to the floor, blood spilling from his mouth. Mason, startled by the commotion, began to cry. Alejandro turned to Jessica. Take Mason upstairs. I'll handle this. Jessica hesitated but nodded. As she turned to leave, she felt someone tugging at her gown. It was Hakobo. His eyes had softened. All the rage and madness from earlier had vanished. Jessica, he pleaded, please don't leave me. I still love you, I always have, but Mason's cries grew louder, and Jessica's patience finally snapped. Brother-in-law, she said coldly, you've crossed every line. Ignoring Hakobo's stunned face, she bent slightly and added, goodbye. Cradling Mason, she turned and walked away. Behind her, the noise of a fresh scuffle erupted. Alejandro's voice was sharp. You like fighting that much?
Fine.
I'll fight with you. Jessica paused for a moment, but, trusting Alejandro and knowing Mr. Han was nearby, she continued upstairs. After calming Mason and putting him to sleep, she heard sirens from the street below. Peering out the window, she saw Hakobo being loaded into an ambulance, bloodied and pale. Beside him, Rowena sobbed, clinging to Alejandro's shirt. What happened to Hakobo? She cried. You're his older brother. How could you do this to him? Alejandro, unmoved, pushed her aside. He brought this on himself. If he hadn't tried to destroy our wedding, I wouldn't have had to touch him. But a strange light flickered in Rowena's eyes. Almost joy. Wait, so you and Jessica are really married now? Does that mean Hakobo can marry me? Alejandro laughed, a sharp sound with no warmth. Close the door, he ordered the guards. At that moment, Jessica's phone rang. It was an executive from the local branch. Miss Jessica, he said respectfully, we've seen the headlines. The scandal about Mr. Hakobo attempting to steal the bride has already caused damage to the company's stock price. If you're ready, we believe this is the best time to proceed with the plans you mentioned. Jessica stared out the window as the ambulance faded into the distance. A wave of relief washed over her. Thank you, Mr.
Sue, she replied.
After hanging up, she felt a pair of arms wrap around her waist. She turned to find Alejandro resting his chin on her shoulder, his voice low and playful. Wife, this is all that brat's fault. He ruined our wedding night. Jessica couldn't help laughing. She sighed, turned to him, and caressed his tense face, her expression tender with just a hint of guilt. Jessica hadn't expected Hakobo to cause such a mess. It had become a real headache. Just earlier, Mr. Sue from the local branch had called, urging her to move forward with Hakobo's dismissal. If we don't act quickly, he'd said, this will only cause more complications. But Alejandro didn't seem concerned at all. He reached out, gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and whispered softly, she'll leave everything to your husband, all right? There was a certain weight in the room, the tension thick enough to sense. Jessica glanced instinctively at Mason, but before she could do anything, Alejandro tilted her chin, forcing her to meet his
eyes.
The air between them turned heavier, more intimate. He'd had a bit of wine, and with just one arm, he pushed her lightly onto the bed, his gaze locked on hers. The next moment, he kissed her deeply, moving down to her neck, making her forget everything for a fleeting second. She quickly caught his wandering hand and warned, if you wake the baby, you'll be the one to calm him. Alejandro's eyes narrowed, clearly ignoring her words as he leaned in again. But just as things were heating up, Mason's small voice broke the moment with a cry. Alejandro froze instantly, a look of pure exasperation crossing his face. This is your fault, he muttered. If you weren't so, Jessica tried to protest, but he cut her off with another kiss, silencing her completely. Stroking her hair, he gave her a teasing smile, glanced at Mason and said, you're tired. I'll take him to the guest room. Get some rest. Watching Alejandro scoop up Mason and quietly leave the room, Jessica finally relaxed and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, her aunt burst into the bedroom. Jessica. Alejandro and Hakobo had a fight at the company. Jessica shot up, quickly got dressed, and told the butler to take her to the office. When she arrived, the second floor was crowded with people. Tension filled the air. From Hakobo's stance, it was clear he had already found out the shareholders were pushing for his removal. The moment he saw Jessica, he froze mid-argument and stared at her in disbelief. "Jessica, was it you? Did you suggest removing me? I was always honest with you, and now you betray me like this." Jessica raised a brow, unimpressed. Her voice was cold. "You're overestimating yourself. This wasn't just me. It was a decision made by Father and Alejandro. You're not capable of leading Han Corp to greatness." Hakobo staggered back, visibly shaken. His eyes filled with resentment. "Jessica, if you want, I'll step down. I'll divorce Rowena right now and marry you instead. Everything I have, it's yours. Just say the word." Her head ached just hearing it. She turned to Alejandro and said calmly, "From now on, don't call me by my name in public. Just call me sister-in-law. It suits the family image better." Hakobo clenched his jaw, veins bulging in fury. Before he could respond, a familiar voice screamed, "Hakobo!" Rowena forced her way through the crowd, grabbing his arm as if she were the true victim. "Hakobo, she's not worth it. Why won't you marry me instead? I'll be your wife, I promise." Her sudden public declaration shocked everyone. "Did I hear that right?" someone whispered. "Rowena and Mr. Han, are they already planning a wedding? I thought they were just dating. Seems like the Han family is having a double celebration." Alejandro, ever the composed elder brother, cleared his throat. "If they truly intend to marry, I'll speak to Father about it. Social status differences aren't that big a deal." Rowena's eyes lit up like a child's. She bounced slightly, pulling Hakobo's arm. "Did you hear that? Your brother agrees. Let's plan the wedding right away." "I'm so happy, Hakobo," I smack. Hakobo's hand struck her face, the slap echoing through the entire building. Everyone fell silent. Rowena's cheerful expression vanished. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Hakobo," she whispered, lips trembling, one hand slowly covering the red imprint on her cheek. His voice was like ice. "When did I ever say I wanted to marry you? The only woman I've ever loved is Jessica. Don't kid yourself." Rowena's body stiffened. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched her face. You were always kind to me. You were always by my side. Why are you doing this now? What does she have that I don't?" Hakobo chuckled bitterly. "You're nothing like her. The only reason I was with you was to make Jessica jealous. And now, because of you, she's married someone else." His words shocked even the onlookers. No one had ever heard Hakobo speak so viciously. Realizing what he had just revealed, Hakobo suddenly calmed, looked away, and said coldly, "Leave. I don't want to see you again." But Rowena continued to cry and beg, so he eventually waved over the guards and ordered them to escort her out. The room turned ice cold, but Hakobo seemed unfazed. He slowly walked up to Alejandro and glared at him with unfiltered rage. "I can't believe this. You were always the calm, composed one. Now you're stealing my woman? I'd rather not have a brother like you." Alejandro lifted an eyebrow slightly, then let out a faint smile. "Do as you wish. I just want to be with Jessica. Nothing else matters." Alejandro's voice cut through the tension like a quiet flame. He didn't shout, didn't provoke. He simply stepped back, turned to Jessica, took her hand, and pressed a gentle kiss to her fingers. Then, meeting Hakobo's shattered gaze, he raised one hand in silent command. The guards instantly moved in, surrounding Hakobo with professional coldness. "Mr. Han," one of them said, "please come with us." But Hakobo, face pale yet resolute, brushed past them without resistance. He walked out on his own, back straight, eyes hollow. Minutes later, the shareholders convened and officially voted to remove Hakobo from his position as CEO. Alejandro agreed to take over temporarily, staying in the country with Jessica until she was ready to assume the role herself. It was a calm, calculated transition. But outside, chaos had erupted. Dozens of employees ran toward the building's entrance. One muttered anxiously, "There was a car accident right in front of us." The police had been called. Witnesses soon revealed the truth. After leaving the building, Hakobo had run into Rowena, who had been waiting for him. Desperate, clinging to her last shred of hope, she had begged him to marry her. But Hakobo, emotionally destroyed, couldn't take it anymore. In a moment of anguish, he shoved Rowena away. She stumbled straight into oncoming traffic. The impact was instant. Blood splattered across the pavement. By the time Jessica and Alejandro arrived, paramedics were already covering her body. Hakobo sat on the curb, silent and motionless, eyes fixed on the white sheet fluttering in the wind. The police checked the security footage, confirmed the sequence of events, and placed Hakobo under arrest. As they handcuffed him, he glanced at Jessica one last time with unreadable eyes, then lowered his head and never looked back. As expected, he was charged with homicide. But the trial didn't move forward right away. Rumors spread quickly that Hakobo's mental health had deteriorated. If confirmed by upcoming evaluations, he would be transferred to a psychiatric facility. Upon hearing this, Mr. Han, already strained by everything, suffered a heart attack and made a decisive choice. From that day forward, Hakobo would no longer be part of the Han family. No inheritance. No name. No place to return. After the storm passed, peace finally began to settle over their lives. Jessica and Alejandro focused on their work, rebuilding and moving forward. For Jessica, this new chapter brought its own challenges. Late one night, still at the office, she sat hunched over papers when she felt a gentle weight settle on her shoulder. "It's time to go home," Alejandro murmured. "You've done enough for today." He placed a warm cup of milk in her hands, then took her wrist gently and gave her a smile that melted all the tension in her chest. She lifted the cup slowly, eyes drawn toward the window. Snow was falling, delicate and slow, catching the golden glow of the street lamps outside. "The first snow of the year," she whispered. Alejandro wrapped his arms around her from behind and pulled her into his warmth. "I love you," he breathed into her ear. And in that moment, with the snow falling silently outside and the world finally quiet, everything felt like a painting, still, beautiful, untouched by the noise of the past.